Okay, so this is my presentation for Task 4 for Unit 3 Project Design, Implementation and Evaluation by me, James Henry Watson. So, this presentation I'm going to talk my project overall in a brief fashion. I am then going to talk about each stages and the outcomes of each stage, and then talk about Task 3 feedback, because that's important as I use my Task 3 feedback to make the final improvements. So then we'll talk about the final improvements and outcomes, and then now we'll look at the final feedback I received for Task 4 after people have looked at the final outcomes. So the idea of the project was to create a game idea. This game idea, I would document lots of details about the game and in terms of how it would play, how it would function, and what it'd be like to use. Part of this project would also be creating graphic artwork and 3D models, and then I'd pitch the game idea to acting investors. So the project had 4 stages, so this is split up into Tasks 1, 2, 3 and 4. I documented all these stages and an entire project on a Blogger account. So let's have a quick look at this Blogger account. So on this Blogger account I've logged all the stages of the project. So for example, for Task 1, the final outcomes of Task 1 was that I had a finished plan for the project, which outlined what the project would entail, all the stages of the project, things like the cost, people involved, sustainability and quality, feasibility, and these sort of things. So that's what I did for Task 1. Task 2 was the main bulk of the project. This is basically carrying out what I planned in Task 1. You can see in here for Task 2 I've also updated this table which I created for Task 1. This outlines the target dates to get parts of the project done and the actual dates I actually finished them. The blog was also created during Task 1 as well. So again, we can have a look at the things I created in Task 2. So the final outcomes of Task 2 was that I had a pitch ready that I presented to an audience, which would talk about the game in detail, and then I'd also have a 3D model and a graphic design, which is this UI design, and those were in the presentation itself. And part of Task 2 as well, I had these documents which explained the game. So I talked about gameplay, functions and the fundamentals, the content of the game. So those are the outcomes of Task 2. Task 3 was an evaluation. So I looked at things, sort of the initial. I looked at my initial project specifications and compared that with what I achieved in Task 2 to see if I achieved everything I wanted to achieve. I also looked at the time management, the quality of work, the feedback. I also suggested improvements that I could make in the future of the project, and a final conclusion. Also for Task 3 I had feedback. I got this feedback from Task 2 when I presented my presentation, presented my game pitch, and had an audience fill out this survey, which was then used for the evaluation, and this feedback was useful then for the Task 4 because with Task 3 the final outcome is that I have evaluated not only my performance throughout the project, but the project itself, and outlined ways in which I can improve the project, which is where Task 4 comes in. As you can see on the blog, I've started to update for Task 4, but I'll talk about this in more detail in my presentation. So, I briefly looked at the feedback, pairs of feedback in more detail. So the main parts of the feedback was that the target audience was not clear, the pitch was too dry, there was too much text, and there was not enough graphic and 3D work. So those were the main points of the feedback from that I looked at in Task 3. So let's have a look at the improvements I made. So these are the final outcomes for Task 4. So this is from my first pitch. As you can see on this slide, for target audience, what I've said is that the target audience are gamers, those specifically interested in World War II era vehicles, which is good, but I didn't go into more detail than that. And the feedback echoes this because they talked about how I didn't talk about age, for example. Well, for Task 4 I've improved this as part of my new pitch that I created. As you can see, I've included a PEGI rating, which I predicted to be a 12 plus for this game, and I've also mentioned why I think that in this slide. So for example, I've mentioned that the game has got destruction, but it does not contain any graphic violence, does not contain explicit content or any sexual content, so that's why it is 12 plus. And this gives the audience a more detailed idea of what the target audience is, the age group of the people that play my game. So that's how I've improved on the target audience in my project. So this is an example of my old pitch again, for pitch improvements. As you can see, there was a lot of text, and that was one of the criticisms of the pitch, is that there was a lot of text and the presentation was a bit dry. So an example of a slide from the old pitch, and this is an example of a slide from the new pitch. As you can see, I've really trimmed down the text on the screen. The idea is that I would be able to read these subheadings and be able to communicate with my audience mostly through verbal communication, in which then I am making more eye contact with my audience instead of just reading from the screen, which means that the presentation and the pitch would be more engaging to my audience, and not only that, the pitch looks more visually attractive. So that's how I've improved on the pitch. Now, before I go into 3D and graphic work, I am actually going to show you my new pitch. The new pitch, as I said, is improved. So this is my new pitch that I created. It's a complete new pitch, and I'll show you what it's like to use. So as we're going through these slides, you'll see that I've really trimmed down the amount of text in each slide, and that I'd focus on verbal communication. I've just concentrated on making the pitch more attractive to the audience and run smoother and more swiftly, just so that the audience finds it more interesting to watch, and they're not reading loads of things on the slides, and they can actually engage with me as I am pitching my game idea to them. So this is just showing what my final pitch would be. So that's part of the final outcomes of my pitch, my project. Right, so back to the 3D and graphic work. So here there's a tank model that I created as part of task 2, and as you can see it's the tank with a black background. Now from feedback, said that while they found the tank model impressive, they would have liked to have seen more 3D work, and as you can see why, because this is the black background, which is the tank. So I've improved this by adding a full 3D garage environment, and this is my approach to improving based on the feedback, because then I would have more 3D work to show. But then I think this better illustrates the garage concept of my game idea, and it better illustrates the game idea as a whole. I think this looks more interesting for the audience to look at. It's just also more visually impressive, and it just gives people a better general idea of what the game is like. So here you can see the two final screenshots, one before, one after, with both the UI, the user interface. The user interface remained the same because the feedback I received about the user interface was generally positive. But I have changed it slightly. As you can see with the user interface, it is slightly more transparent, and this is so it blends better with the new environment that I've created. So that's just showing the final differences between what I had in task 2 and the final outcome in task 4. So the target audience, the new pitch, and these new environments, 3D environments and new IAs, the final outcomes of the project. So that's my presentation showing the final outcomes. Next I'll have a look at the final feedback I received for the project.